Hey everyone, Anders Sundquist here, host of the Lean In podcast. And as we approach episode 50, hosting Jason James here, who's co founder of Tezi.ai, also functioning as the COO. And we're going to unpack today a bit about the origin story, kind of why you jumped into the TA tech space after this impressive corporate career, Jason. But more so, talking to the TA and people leaders that tune into the Lean In podcast is what is agentic and co-pilot recruiting? What is this tool optimizing for and solving for? The mantra in the market today is doing more with less, and TA teams are smaller than ever and have the same output. So we're going to unpack all that today. So thanks for tuning in. And without further ado, Jason, the first question I always ask guests is what got you into TA? And not that you're an active TA leader, but you co-founded a tool that's helping TA teams. So tell us your journey, man.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I can cover a bit of background as a precursor to that. So I'm about 23 years into my career, which has primarily been in design and product management. The first decade was in more traditional design, like brand marketing, advertising in like an agency context, and then the last 13 in tech. Typically as a head of design at some early stage startup from pre-product, and then progressively I joined later stage companies. And so I have been a hiring manager since 2004. I've hired about 300 people over the course of my career, most of which has been the last two companies. So I, in 2016, joined Thumbtack and was there for about 4 years. Much of my duties were in head of design, which covered product design, research, brand. At times, I led product management and growth marketing there as well.
Right.
And so did a ton of hiring at Thumbtack. And then after Thumbtack, I joined Instacart for about 2 years. The first two as VP of design, in which design was very far behind engineering hiring. It was the bottleneck for the company. And the main thing the CEO asked me to do is unblock our eng hiring. We can't hire more engineers because we don't have enough designers.
Wow.
So
What a task.
uh, we did about 150 hires in that first year as VP of design, and then continue to add them more like incrementally after we got caught up. And then the last two at Instacart was as VP of product, running the consumer business in the lead up to our IPO in fall of 2023. Took a few months off and then founded this company. So given that, I've the thing I've done most besides product development is hiring.
Yeah.
And
Hundreds.
yeah, and so in doing that, I've worked with talent teams of zero, where I have to do all the legwork myself, and I'm an RC at night to
Calendar
be able
invite.
to, yeah, to very large scaled, talent organizations at Instacart of like 100 plus people, and so and everything in between. And in seeing all that, it's been apparent to me how much manual, like kind of rote, busy work goes into it that nobody really enjoys. It's just there's not like better alternatives in the software. And with the emergent AI wave, it became apparent to me and my co-founder, he's done about as much hiring, is that the technology now enables a lot of that busy work, that mundane work to be offloaded to the AI. And then what remains are the things that are more uniquely human, which is pitching the opportunity, evaluating candidates, making offers, closing
Yes.
those offers, and advising hiring managers on how to like structure the process.
Yep.
So, and I think that's for any of the recruiters I've worked with, where they would rather spend their time than answering the same question over and over on a phone screen.
Can confirm, and I would extend on that and say not just the recruiters, but the TA leaders. Heads of people are looking generally for recruiters who can be an advisor to the business, to the stakeholders, create a great candidate experience, and have some element of talent intelligence, right? And mapping out markets and the compensation in different geos and the attributes of different candidates and the talent density pockets in different markets. And when we start to talk about these things in recruiting, that is more of the advisory role, which in in a pre-automation era, is difficult to spend as much time on that when you're sending calendar invites at night, right? And so
Mhm.
we'll unpack a bit more about that. But I think it would help the audience today. Let's assume the folks tuning in don't know what Tezi is or solves for. Like, give the high level, not a pitch, but explain the tech behind what Max does and why you chose end to end and not like bifurcating on just sourcing or just scheduling or just any pocket of the recruiting process, which the life cycle can take weeks or months.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, So at a high level, what we've built is an AI agent. We call that AI agent Max. It recruits on behalf of companies. Almost exclusively, we're focused right now on partnering with in-house teams,
Right.
the tech industry to help them. And you can think of Max as AI recruiting labor. And so in order to truly be like a labor partner, this has to do sort of work proactively. It has to be able to own and see through and finish like tasks and then report back its progress rather than, I don't know, the ATS, which tends to sit there and it's just waiting for a human to come and poke some buttons. Otherwise, it's doing nothing.
Yeah. Stagnant.
So uh, we took a very broad end-to-end approach, like you alluded to, which is the primary pillars of the product are inbound application review, sourcing, screening, and scheduling. We also do some amount of like candidate management with collecting scorecards, following up, teeing up decisions, and that's just sort of the beginning. We plan to cover it all sort of end to end. We've established some reporting.
Yeah.
But the reason why we built something so broad is manifold. One, we have worked in many of these big companies and understand point solutions get ripped out. And like every company prefers an all-in-one. Right now, that's the ATS to some extent, if it has a bunch of features like Ashby. But there's an opportunity for a more all-in-one on the labor side, not just the SaaS tooling side.
Right.
So with that, we raised a bigger seed round. We hired a more senior team, and we were largely heads down for a year to get the product into a shape that, like, because the breadth of it makes it challenging to build, but it helps us be more resilient. And then companies, their pain points vary, even by role. Sometimes it's like we get a tremendous amount of inbound for this role, and we just need some way to review it. To other roles where it has to be much more sourcing based. And so we think we can serve companies better by taking that broader approach. It helps us stick around. And enables us to truly be like a labor equivalent versus where if you don't have the extra recruiter headcount, you can actually rely on Max as like a full life cycle recruiter. Whereas if we were a point solution, then we're going to need the recruiter to tell the point solution what to do.
Right. Then there's sort of the unit economics are fundamentally different, especially if there's like you said, a point play, and often the conversation in with TA leaders today is like, well, what's your stack and what are you solving for? And then along the funnel, with filtering, with sourcing, with scheduling, and then, ultimately with kind of stakeholder management or talent intelligence and review and that initial screening. And there's certainly a new tool for each of those. And there's incumbents as well that are adding features to try and capture and solve for that as well. One of the interesting things when I'm talking to people or talent leaders is like, there's this pressure from the C-suite or the board to, especially in recruiting, where are you implementing AI and how are you,
Yeah.
reducing labor costs and do it now, like invest in this and cut OpEx. And I'd say, okay, well, but then on the other side of that is like, with a lot of these AI tools, especially the larger the organization, there's bottlenecks with procurement and security and compliance. And tell us a bit about your experience just with that, and kind of where along the company size and scale you see blockers with onboarding, if you can allude to any of that.
So right now, as a bit of context, we are like a sales-led product. So you need to talk with sales. We do some white glove onboarding to get you started. So our deal cycle tends to be about 2 weeks. And that is given it's just much easier for early stage companies to buy.
Yeah,
And
less friction.
they don't have that procurement function. They don't have the legal privacy sort of overhead. And they often don't have a talent team. And so then they just like,
Or they're
we need help.
one
Yeah.
person. Yeah.
It's like a head of ops that covers HR plus recruiting plus support plus operations. And so this person is drowning and they just need some help. And so those deals close very quick. The big company deals, it's a long cycle. And so we've invested in doing what we need to do to get sort of more enterprise grade. So SOC 2, type 2 compliance. We did our like anti like AI bias audit through, a third party to make sure that we're compliant with like New York law 144. And we're going to keep investing in like compliance. So GDPR is coming. We already comply with CCPA. So these things help. We're investing in some automation and AI around our like InfoSec questionnaires. But I don't know, like, I guess we we're trying to build our business to be resilient enough that the small companies that close quickly will keep us going and growing,
Yeah. Yeah.
while the big companies, you know, figure.
Yeah. They'll be figuring it out. It'll be a slower and longer sales cycle. I'm laughing. I have friends that close community of recruiting friends in early stage startups, seed A all the way up through your Fortune 50 companies, and those in more enterprise roles would love to demo something like this, but they know that they never will be, and they're stuck with some of the incumbent tools and Boolean bingoing their way through some of these tough searches. So alas, here we are, and that's the nature of the beast in tech. But I want to actually want to unpack. So let's talk about some of the language we've been using: agentic, copilot, automation. I think it's important to lay a foundation as we talk more on the show here about what do those words mean, and where does Max fit on that spectrum?
Mhm.
Because I think that as AI tooling disrupts the TA space, this is the way that recruiters will become efficient in the future. And if we don't like educate, our teams today, that there are people getting left behind. I'm already seeing this happen actually with teams that I manage firsthand, and I'll get into that in a few moments. But just esoteric, high level, let's talk what is an agent, what is agentic versus copilot versus just pure automation.
Okay, so the way that we think about it is an agent, you can think of at least the agent that we've constructed as comparable to an employee. So think of it like a person. And you would have the same sort of expectations that they understand their job duties. You need to give them a little bit of context to get them like ramped up and onboarded. But otherwise, they know how to do their job and they're going to go do work. And you can monitor their work to make sure that they're good at their job, but you don't have to tell them, hey, here's how to build a list of candidates. Here's how to like write a good email. And it should have, two follow-ups or three follow-ups, that sort of thing. So our agent, so an agent then is proactive, it's doing work, that sort of thing. Whereas a co-pilot is more akin to, I guess, like a helper for you to do work. So think of it like, okay, I built a list of candidates that I want to source. Help me generate an email. And it'll generate the email, and then you'll go through and manually like tweak it and edit it and stuff like that.
Well
And
said.
so its efficiency for your workflow, it probably made you 10, 20% more efficient at that, but it's not going to do anything on its own.
Yeah.
And so then pure automation would be, I think of it as more just like heuristics and rule based, where it doesn't have, I guess, as much nuance or judgment. So the same way that many tools you could pre-program the follow-ups and it's like an if this then that
If this, then
statement.
that, you're setting up a series of zaps or what have you. And that automation's been around for a while, and creative recruiters have. There's been an era of tools that have come and gone, and some for better or for worse. There was a period where I won't mention specifics, but LinkedIn automation was in vogue, and there were let's call them bots that would reach out with a request, and I think all of us have received message or a request that wasn't personalized and felt like spam, and that was definitely something that I think LinkedIn's gotten in front of. But I want to come back to it. Agent and Copilot. I think this is important. If you're a people or a talent leader today, and you have a team that's, I'm laughing because adoption is the word that comes to mind. It's like resistant to adopting a new tool, or they're stuck in their ways with a legacy tool. And and not to name names, but the origin. I've been recruiting mostly on the vendor or the agency side for 15 years. And when I started, it was at one of the biggest, still is one of the biggest agencies. Tech Systems, Aerotech family, and it was the phone book era of recruiting. There's a database, and you just cold called, and you manually typed in this database, and that was the nature of the beast. And then along came more internet focused LinkedIn database type searching, and then here we are talking about AI and agents. But what's happened along the way is there's been tools, and then there's this latency to adoption. At least that's been my
Yeah.
observation.
Yep.
And what I'm seeing now with clients I work with or friends in the industry that are very forward thinking is there's often this even C-suite or board level interest in AI or in agentic workflows. They understand this could create more efficiency and help TA teams do more with less, literally. And then often down boots on the ground, there is sometimes fear or misunderstanding about what an agentic workflow looks like. And I'll say for myself, and I've been, one of the things I love about hosting this podcast and being a talent leader is I've demoed or used many of these tools out there. And I'll say that there's a learning curve. There, there,
Yes.
there is this learning curve. But what I've found is when I'm using tools like Tezi or others that are more manual but still have automation involved, and you're engaging with natural language processing in some bot, is that there is this learning curve to maybe using talent architecture and description of attributes of a profile and what you need scheduled, and then trusting that it can do that for you. Can you tell us more about, I want to see, like the adoption cycles, or maybe like your forecasts for how this might, as an industry, just high level, change where we're at as an industry? Is this something that'll happen next year? Is this something like in 10 years that will be ubiquitous? I know it's kind of esoteric, but like, what does James, the human, think about the impact on the industry?
Yeah. So the change management here is a very real like consideration. We've seen fascinating things happen with some of our customers where, for example, we connect to their ATS, they set up Max for the role, and then Max will, and we tell them like, okay, this means because you've set up sourcing, screening, scheduling, bound application review, Max is gonna own the role, sort of end to end. You can keep an eye on things, but you don't really need to do anything until it comes time to like make an offer and close. And they're like, okay, that sounds great. Uh, but then what may still happen is, okay, Max sources a candidate, the candidate goes through a screening conversation, they get scheduled for round one, it goes well, scorecard comes in, and then hiring manager decides to advance. Well, some RC that like wasn't in the loop on any of this, like finds the candidate in the ATS and
Oh,
reaches out to them to schedule. What they didn't real, and that happens, 2 days after the decision was made, because I don't know, it was the weekend or something.
yeah, yeah.
Max actually, like 5 minutes after the decision to advance happened, emailed the candidate. Candidate already replied. Candidate's already booked and is confused as to why it's being asked to schedule again.
Yeah, yeah.
This like workflow is dramatically different. And so it's quickly adopted where there was no workflow in place. So this is like pre-TA team, companies where they're not that opinionated because they don't really know how it's supposed to work and they just need help. And so they'll adopt quickly. Those companies grow up over time, as some of them, don't survive. And so I think that's part of like how the industry, at least tech industry, will evolve. Now, with the larger companies, I think it's going to take more time. And the way it starts with them is they have a mandate to stay lean, figure it out with AI. And so they'll want to do a bunch of pilots. And so they can set up max for 5, 10 roles or something like that. And then it's helpful to have like a couple people on the team that really like understand what the technology is doing, what they can expect from it. But then when they want to convert post-pilot to, something more steady state, then it's going to take time and effort to like ramp up more of the other team, try and figure out what goes to Max, what goes to the human team,
Yeah,
and how they interface, where their handoffs are. And a lot of established companies, they have a belief in like their own secret sauce about like the process and stuff like that. So over time, where we fall in terms of what we built is on the like sort of extreme end of like agentic and automated. What we've then had to back into as we talk to increasingly larger customers is adding sort of more copilot-y
perfect.
features, giving them there's more gating in the process where Max is checking in
More
rather
human in
than
the loop elements. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And that's what they want and need. But the hope is that they develop trust, the product increasingly
yeah,
gets better,
yeah,
and then some of the gates along the way
yeah,
get removed. And
yeah.
so that's how I think it works.
It's interesting. I've had other guests share, and just anecdotally, friends in the industry of tech companies with 500 to 5,000 heads say, one of the dings on candidate experience, either through an applicant or through a passively sourced candidate, is this dwell time. Any TA leader laughing, tuning in right now
Yeah.
is going to say time and stage dwell time is something we're trying to fix, or we can work on it, and ultimately it's a function of that candidate waiting to hear back on next steps, either proceeding or declining. And you know when I've talked to teams that have implemented something fully agentic, Max or a similar type tool, I've heard something interesting, which is like, and I don't know if Max can do this, but some tools you can elect to either have the candidate can elect to have let's call it a mat or a bot response, like to engage on their own with the software, with the AI, or wait to talk to the live person. It makes me think of like calling an airline, and you can go through these prompts. And
Mhm.
just engaging at all with a company increases candidate experience because at least they proceeded in the process, didn't wait for the recruiter. Maybe they were talking to a Max type agent. And even if they were declined from that initial screen, they at least felt like they were engaged. And so that reducing that dwell time,
Mhm.
increasing engagement is something that was observed. And so that's one of the things that I've heard is what's exciting is potentially improving candidate experience. Because right now, one of the facts that we're seeing is this disconnect, right? This signal to noise ratio on applicants, and you open a full stack engineer role. You're a recently public tech company. In 72 hours, you have 1,000 applicants, and it's impossible for one person or even a team to filter and even send a canned response to all of those folks and then hit their own SLAs. And so this is where you might be able to solve for this at scale. I don't know if you've seen or experienced the same thing, but it just leads me to this point of like TA teams of the future. We might have better candidate experience and performing TA teams using a tool like this to the advantage of the TA team to be more of an advisor, right? Focus on the relationship internally and with the candidate, and then reduce that dwell time, right?
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. I think so agents need to keep getting smarter. We need to keep sort of getting the best out of them.
Yeah.
But over time, this will be a much better like candidate experience.
Yeah.
I've seen candidates for roles that been excited about those candidates get lost because recruiter forgot to follow up, they took too long, or like RC dropped the ball on
Yeah.
scheduling. Drop balls have been sort of maddening for me as like a hiring manager. And so agents are better at that. The speed to hire is much better because it doesn't work office hours. It doesn't, so it's working 24/7 and has unlimited capacity and
Yeah.
can parallel path everything and stuff like that. We closed this staff level software engineer in November. She was like deep into the process with this other company and pretty excited about them because she had a friend there. We were able to get into process with her start to finish and get to offer within a couple, like 2 weeks, let's say,
Wow.
before they had even like wrapped their process.
Finish
And
the review.
she ended up joining us and said like the speed by which Max moved
Yeah.
was like game changing for like her interest and ability to join the company because otherwise she would have just gone with the other role. So I think these are the sorts of opportunities that the technology affords. Yeah, it will take some time for people to learn how to best utilize it.
I want to come back to a comment that you made and learn a little more. And I'm personally, genuinely curious about the AI behind an agent, in general, and Max specifically, if you want to unpack that, if you can. But you said agents need to get smarter, and so tell us about how does AI power an agent, Max specifically, but just even in general. And then, talk about that fine tuning and that reinforced learning piece of an agent as it relates to recruiting.
Yeah, so I think it was Brett Taylor or Clay at Sierra that articulated this sort of best, and how so software development, it's moved from being sort of rules based to now being like goals and guardrail based. So you have an objective and then also you don't want to like slip below a certain guardrail. With that, then how do agents improve? They improve beyond just like the basics of LLMs getting better,
Mm-hmm.
which you kind of get for free as an agentic product. Is they improve based on more factual knowledge and more procedural knowledge and additional systems integrations. And so for us, how some of that plays out is we have like a candidate database of 750 million global profiles. We continue to build into that by developing new data sources where some are proprietary licensed data, some are through specialized APIs such as Crunchbase or something like that, to public web, to research papers, better sources of data than agents can. It's how you can be better than ChatGPT, for example, or integrating with the ATS. So by integrating with the ATS at like some publicly traded company, let's take, for example, Coinbase. They already know everyone in the
Mm-hmm.
crypto space. Those
Mm-hmm.
people are already in their database. So how the agent can be better is to be context aware that, oh, okay, this company's already interacted with this person. They didn't take the job back in 2018, but there's a whole history here. So can we reference that in outreach to re-engage them, so that it's not just coming in cold and ignorant? These are some of the things. Otherwise, the agents improve through feedback loops with the recruiter, with the hiring manager. They improve through specific signals that we have of like candidate rating, like thumbs up, thumbs down, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes me curious actually more about the feedback loop cycle. I think this is huge. This is something as we're talking, and learning more about agentic TA tools, it's becoming even more clear that the full life cycle recruiter of years past, let's say before agentic TA tools, will certainly now need to have like that. I use the term talent architect, or a subject matter expertise in not just what their customers looking for and the technical attributes, but also like those. You talked earlier about compensation and different geos and some of those.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
By architecting the agent's initial attributes, or telling it do this, go, and then fine tuning it, that's how it's playing the role of the advisor, I guess, and being the
Yeah.
conduit, the proxy between that business stakeholder who's then looking for this and then running that process. And that might be where we can focus as TA teams of the future, of sharpening those skills, because we'll be doing less of the manual tasks, almost to the point of maybe none of those manual tasks, potentially, unless
Yeah. I think that's right.
by choice.
Yeah. Yeah,
Nice.
we think that the future moves from this like human-led workflow where humans are doing each and every step in the process to an agent-led workflow that's supervised by humans. And so that is, you can kind of think of it as like this senior recruiter becomes a head of talent
Yeah.
for their team of agents.
Yeah.
And so they spend their time on more strategic things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
hopefully they enjoy their job more.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think fundamentally, then they get to focus on those relationships, and on the candidate side, that one of the most important parts of a relationship is closing and onboarding, and that's where that relationship of trust and wherever the handoff happens from an agent to, say, the internal, the human, right, is
Hmm.
critical, and then the handoff again to the manager, the stakeholder,
Hmm.
the business leader who hired them, and I think this trend, is continuing. Want to So curious, when you look into the future, I guess, like, and not to give away the product roadmap, but do you see patterns of, like, we talked a lot about where we are today from, like, the agentic tool perspective, what Max can do today, and, like, do you hear a mantra or a theme, like a pattern of, like, what your customers or what talent leaders in the industry want in terms of product or feature requests in the future? Like, you've built this thing that does this, and now does the market tell you, oh, but we actually wanted to do more of this, that, or the other in a different direction?
Mm.
Meaning, like, what are you getting just from market feedback in terms of what customers want agents to do for them? Maybe that's slightly different from what you initially thought. Like, is there a delta from MVP to, like, oh, now we actually need to shift this way, move that way, as feature requests come in?
So we spent a lot of time with talent leaders and prospective customers. We probably did about 100 interviews before we built and released the product. And so with that, we got a lot right
Yeah.
about it. What they care the most about is top of funnel.
Yeah.
Like it's because it's the big numbers. And when you get down funnel, there's just fewer folks. And so it's like not as hard to do scheduling as it is to crush through 3,000 inbound applications per role. Like right now, they're deriving no value from that inbound applicant bucket because it's just too damn much and they can't get through it. But to get some value from it, oh my God, that like makes it puts way less pressure on sourcing, for example. So sourcing and inbound application review is the thing that they care about. Company typically buys for one or the other. And then the fact that they get more is great. So we got that right. What we didn't get right is, well, no, we knew that we were starting at that sort of like extreme end of like full automation. And so then we're backing into more copilot-y
Right.
controls and stuff like that. And so I guess that was a known thing. And not everybody, not many people are at a place where they're like fully trusting of AI. And so they want more controls. And so
Very
we're
good.
giving them progressively more controls,
Very
but our
good.
bias is like automation. Now, so that's part of what we're doing. And then what we've heard from the market is we started at a place that was similar to ChatGPT, where it's like very stat based. That makes sense for like if you feel like you're interacting with the person and like you can just Slack them and tell them sort of what it is that you need. But unless the agent is like perfect,
Yeah.
it's you're going to hit sort of walls from time to time of things it can't do, and you're not going to be totally sure why.
Yeah.
So we've moved a lot out of chat and into more traditional UI, because that gives you more of a clue as to like what's the sandbox by which like I can
Parameters.
use to like what can I count on this thing for? What can it do? What can it not do? And you just can't communicate that with like an empty composer,
Yeah,
that they're going
command
to
line.
drop anything into.
Yeah. Well, I think so. Well said. And you've touched on it a couple times now that, Max and just in general, something that was in the envision was it would start like end to end, fully automated, maybe building the human in the loop into maybe that's the psychology of adoption here. Maybe that's just what's happening, and maybe slowly that will move towards more automated. I don't know. I've heard analogies on this show and in the industry of recruiting talent sometimes follows sales teams, and where there's a bit of a lag. And I think that's an interesting analogy, maybe not perfect, but I think I can see what they meant by that. Curious to kind of segue or thread in what you said into some just general advice, right? So talking to the audience today, again, we have people and talent leaders from companies with 5 people to 5,000 tuning in and even bigger. And so um, advice, you're building this tool, and some folks have never even seen or demoed something that's agentic. And so giving advice to whether it's a sourcer or recruiter on the call, or their manager, or an executive, advice to the TA industry on how to, I don't want to say the word prepare, but optimize their career for something agentic that's happening and coming, and where to focus the skill set of the future on 3, 5 years down the road.
Um, I will try and chip away at it sort of roll by roll. So we could start, we can start with the recruiter or the recruiting coordinator. If I were that person, I would find something else to do. Um, Scheduling, it's hard to get right, but it will get cracked like in the next year or two. And so I would try to figure out a different sort of career path and opportunity. And I think same goes for the sourcers. It's just not going to be 5 years from now. I don't think it'll be a role. Maybe no, probably not even for exec recruiting, because it's like an agent will always be better at like crushing through a lot of data to
Right.
find the needle in that haystack faster and better than like a person will. Right now, the person brings some judgment, some analysis on top of like the observable data, but agent will get there. So I would be looking for what's next, reskilling, trying to get into a different field if I were in one of those roles. If I were the recruiter, I would think, I guess, pretty hard about my value add and how can I be more strategic? How can I be advisory? I would try to evaluate myself relative to AI. And so
Well said.
what do I uniquely bring to the table that is hard for AI to replicate now and seems quite hard in the future? And so that's, I guess, more complex reasoning. It's like persuasion and collaboration. So it's emotional rapport and stuff like that. So that's where I would invest as a recruiter. And then I would also invest in like using a lot of AI tools, not just professionally, but personally, so that I would be AI fluent. For talent ops, I think if your role is to produce reports or assess tools or provision them, you know, run a big team, imagine a future where that team is 80% smaller.
Mm.
How much work would you still have like in that future? You might have some because you might play a key role in orchestrating and overseeing the agents. But it's a tenuous, I guess, position if like the TA team is smaller. And then head of talent, I think of as the pressure to stay lean and use AI is here to stay. And the companies, and it's not particular to like a TA org. It's companies that can have 50 people instead of 200 people
Yeah.
and produce the same amount of growth and profit are going to be the companies of the future versus the ones that rely heavily on humans. And so if you believe that reality as a head of talent, then it's your duty and obligation to figure out what that means for your function.
Yeah.
And so I would devote time to figuring out the tools, talking to a lot of folks like me, talking to our competitors, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I've seen this happening in real time already, and I'll leave with this crude analogy, for better or for worse, of my experience with Tesla's full self-driving, where I initially didn't want to try it, didn't believe it would work. I tried it. I was sweaty and had my hands over the wheel and was like locked in, and I overrode it a couple times, and a couple drives, a few more drives, and eventually it works. And often better than some humans that I see on the road. And, I'm still a human aware and in the loop. And thanks to the safety features and cameras, paying attention. But I believe there's a world not far away where that is not required. And the car can full self drive completely on its own. And again, a crude analogy, but that's been my experience with one AI tool. And I've gone through that, metamorphosis personally in my day job as well, watching agentic workflows become trusted and then adopted and then work. And
Yeah.
I just think in summary, TA teams of the future will look different. I think AI is here to stay and no one has a crystal ball. That's my kind of sign off on the show is, the crystal ball and my forecast says that it's here to stay. And I don't know exactly how it will look and feel, but I do think efficiency is increasing for those teams that adopt it, whether it's Max or another. So my advice would simply be experiment. Gosh, if you're out there and don't know, start, do a
Right.
demo if you
Right.
can, either if you're internal or if you work for another organization and you can't, for security purposes, get one with your day job, so to speak. Try every AI tool you can in your home life,
Yep.
and it will benefit you. So those are kind of my parting words is experiment and adopt, because I think you'll see that it can increase efficiency. Any other words of wisdom, Jason, before we part ways on the Lean In podcast today?
I mean, I agree with everything you said. It's an exciting moment, but also perhaps a scary one. But any time spent really learning this technology personally or professionally will be time well spent because it is definitively like the future.
Well said. Well said. And so, if you're curious and tuning in about agentic workflows, hit up Jason or his team at Tezi.ai. I'm sure they can answer your questions. And grateful for you joining, man. I've learned a lot from our chats and excited and cheering on Tezi. So, thanks for joining.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks so much.
Take care. Bye.
Yeah.